subscribers. I've got a great video for everybody today because I'm gonna squash a little argument that's always, a buzz in Christianity. So basically, every time somebody like myself comes out and tries to say, I've calculated when the end might be and so forth, we're always labeled as, out there and this and that there. Nobody wants to ever consider any calculations somebody offers or any, year of the end days that anybody's going to offer. And there are a lot of different theories out there, and people have different methods of obtaining even the same years as other people. There's thousands of different theories on what year it is or this and that there. And because of this, everybody just doubts any year or date that's given. But I've given great evidence for 2023 in my other videos. But I'm not here to talk about why I think it's 2023. I'm here to show people that, contrary to popular Christian belief, that God actually does want us to know and calculate when the end days will be. Because we know that Jesus arrives with the end days, we could also therefore say God wants us to know and calculate when the arrival of Jesus will be. So, to squash that little argument that always comes up, oh, you can't know when the end days will come and this and that. Like I've said a million times, if you go read the verses, it's only one verse repeated about 3 times in the whole of the New Testament where it says you cannot know the day or the hour. There's nothing about you can't know the year. Okay, you might even be able to know the month. But the point is, there's nothing wrong with claiming to know the year. Okay, and we're not fussing over if it's 2023 or not. I'm not here to talk about what the number is. I'm just here to talk about whether people can actually know the year of the end or whether it's not possible. Okay, if it's not possible, then everybody and myself are just out there, with far-fetched, far-out theories for no reason. But I will show with verses here right now, and it will not take very long to read through these few verses, that contrary to popular belief, God does want us to know. He's wanted us to know for about 2,500 years, actually. That's how old these verses go. So what we have to do is, what I will do, let me check my time, is I'll start off here real quick because somebody mentioned this verse the other day, and I admire their effort, but here's my response, and it's beautiful. See, I went into this with faith, not even knowing what the Greek said, the original Greek text, and the Greek word that's actually there, because when they translate from the original languages into our English, things get altered. So looking at the Greek text and looking at the word that is right here in Matthew 6:3, it proves my side of the argument, not the common Christian belief that you can't know when things are going to happen. So this is the verse. It says, and at morning, foul weather today, and I think Jesus is speaking too, right? For the heaven is red, gloomy. You hypocrites, the face of the heavens indeed ye do know to discern, but the signs of the times ye are not able. So somebody mentioned this verse to me as evidence as we're not able to know when the end will come. My faith told me I had nothing to worry about. If I go look in the Greek, it's actually going to show that the actual word that was written in the actual New Testament document, that it would reveal pretty much the opposite. I had faith in that, and when I go look it up, this is what it is. So in the Greek, the word is dynaste, okay? Dynaste or dynasthe. Now, this is not my opinion. In neutrality, I've opened up its concordance in the Bible, okay? Well, which would be the New Testament because it's Greek, right? Reading from the top of the list down very quickly, these are the uses of the term dynasthe throughout the rest of the New Testament, okay? In Matthew 6:24, you are able. Matthew 12:34, are you able? Matthew 16:3, you are able. Matthew 20, are you able? Right? Then we have more. Are you able? Ye may, you can, you are able. Can ye? Are you able? One or two you cannot. The vast majority all are, you are able. So the use of that word, which is the word present in that verse, is actually saying you are able. Okay? So what Jesus is actually doing is he's rubbing it in their face that, oh, you guys think you're so smart, you know how to calculate astronomical and weather patterns and this and that, but the signs of the times you're not able to calculate. Like, Jesus was about to go and be put to death and resurrect and judge Satan, and it was going to be the end of that age and the start of the reign of God, and all these fantastic things, and the disciples are oblivious to that. So Jesus was rubbing it in their face, like, you guys aren't able to perceive that these times are coming. You know what I mean? That's the use of the word. It's not what people commonly take it to be, that you are not able to know the times. And further proof that I'm correct, if we go down to uh, Luke 12:56, he says, hypocrites, is this the same one? Oh, it is the same one, but check this. It says, hypocrites, the face of the earth and of the heaven ye have known to make proof of, but this time, how do you not make proof of it? So that's, if I'm not mistaken, saving some time, that's probably the same conversation, just paralleled in another gospel. But it shows this perspective. It says, but this time, how are you not able to make proof of it? So I'm sorry, but that proves my argument here, right? There is no, rule where you cannot know when things will happen. And another one here, right? Jesus says in Luke 19:44, talking about when the temple will be destroyed, and lay thee low and thy children with thee, and they shall not leave in thee a stone upon a stone, because thou did not know the time of thy inspection. So the next two verses I want to read are very powerful. If we go to Luke 12:36, it says, and ye like to men waiting for their Lord, when he shall return out of the wedding feast. So this is people who are waiting for Jesus' arrival. You cannot wait for Jesus 2,000 years. I mean, you could, but when it says it like this, to me it implies that these are people who know roughly when the arrival will be, so they're getting ready in that time period. But it's further proven as we read lower down. But I'll start. It says, and ye like to men waiting for their Lord, when he shall return out of the wedding feasts, that he, having come and knocked, immediately they may open to him. Happy those servants whom the Lord, having come, shall find. Oops, tilting over there. It says, happy those servants whom the Lord, having come, shall find watching. So this is reinforcing the concept that these aren't just people perpetually watching. Like, no matter what generation you're born in over that 2,000 year span, you're just perpetually watching as a Christian. It pushes away from that concept and reinforces the concept that no, it's giving us the impression that these are people who are aware of roughly when it will occur, so they are ready and watching in that time. Because it says, happy those servants whom the Lord, having come, shall find watching. Verily I say to you that, I mean, how could you be like, he'll arrive and find people watching for his arrival? You have to understand that. That's being reinforced. He will arrive and find people watching for his arrival. You cannot just apply that, like we just mentioned prior, as a blanket across all Christians because we're just spiritually ready to be taken or whatever at any time. No, there's certain people who know when it might occur. They are watching for when it will occur in that time period. And when Jesus arrives, it says, happy those servants whom the Lord, having come, shall find watching. Verily I say to you that he will gird himself and will cause them to recline at meat, and having come near will minister to them. So that's very interesting. Oh, man, I wasn't supposed to close that. 1 second. I have to open that one back up. There was something lower down that was important there. 1 second. Yeah, right here. Ah, yes, there's a lot that I needed to read. So this is what the same chapter, Luke 12. Sorry that I closed it, waste time there. Just lower down, it says in verse 45, this is for people who weren't watching for when he was to arrive. They didn't have that, with, even if they themselves didn't crack the the puzzle, solve the mystery of the book of Daniel, the calculations, because that's hard to do. Don't get me wrong, but there's people teaching it. Like I'm trying to teach awareness of 2023, but others and so forth. But people aren't listening to it. They don't care about it. So consider, common Christianity, the average Christian today, commonplace. It's commonplace to be like, oh no, you can't know when Jesus is coming. Okay, so remember that when I read the following verses. That's what people believe. You can't know when he's coming. What we don't know, we'll never know when he comes. And that's that, right? So it says here, and if that servant may say in his heart, my Lord does delay to come, and may begin to beat the menservants. So this is in contrast to the ones before who are watching for him, so that when he comes, they may immediately let him in, and he will find that they are watching when he arrives, right? In contrast to that, it offers this. It says, and if that servant may in his heart say, my Lord does delay to come, and may begin to beat, sin basically, beat the men servants and maid servants, to eat and to drink and be drunken, the Lord of that servant will come in a day which he does not look for him. Now I want to stop there in case I forget to mention after I finish reading the verse. The fact that it's saying it like this, the logical, obviously implied statement that goes right in hand with this is, he's saying that if you're not watching and ready, I will come and catch you by surprise. That is what was just stated. What is logically implied along with it is that if you are watching and ready, you will not be caught by surprise. That is logically implied by the statement Jesus makes here. Right? The Lord of that servant will come in a day which he does not look for him if he's not watching, right? And says that, oh, Jesus isn't coming soon. We don't know when he's coming. He's just delaying to come. We don't know. It's just a big question mark. If you're doing that, but you're a good person, maybe you'll be okay. But if you're doing that and you're doing sins or whatever, you'll be caught by surprise, right? In an hour that he does not know. And it says, I will cut him off, and his portion with the unfaithful he will appoint. But it says, and that servant who having known his Lord's will and not having prepared, nor having gone according to his will, shall be beaten with many stripes. So that's very important. I mean, it's a huge expansion on that simple statement, dramatically expanded upon, showing two stark contrasts. People who are ready and watching for his arrival to immediately let him in contrast to those who say, oh no, he's delaying to come. And they go on living their, regular, imperfect lives. Right? There's two stark contrasts there. So just remember that. That's in Luke 12, right? So that to me strongly shows that we should be watching. And the only way to watch for his immediate, for his arrival, even if we won't know the day or hour, we might at least know the year. We should be able to at least calculate the year. And that's what we get from Daniel here, right? And again, I'm not here to fuss over the numbers of the year or what the year will be. That's not important right now. It's whether we can know it or not. So the last two verses I want to read before I read the proof verses from Daniel is in Revelation 3:3. Let me check my time. Revelation 3:3, it says, remember then how thou hast received and heard, and be keeping and reform. Oh, sorry, and this is Jesus giving an edict to the churches. He says, remember then how thou hast received and heard, and be keeping and reform. If then thou mayest not watch. So if you do not watch for what? His arrival. This is mentioned tons of times in the New Testament, right? So if then you don't keep watch, I will come upon thee as a thief. Now that goes right in hand and proves my interpretation of Luke 12 that I just read, which I think is a very logical, straight up interpretation. It's not twisting anything. It's what it says quite clearly and plainly, that if you're not watching, you'll be caught by surprise. And Jesus says it here like a second witness, if you don't watch, I will come upon you as a thief, and thou mayest not know what hour I will come upon thee. Same thing Luke 12 said. Okay? And Revelation 16:15, just to cap it off, Jesus says, Lo, I do come as a thief. Happy is he who is watching and keeping his garments, that he may not walk naked, and they may see his unseemliness. Because when Jesus arrives suddenly, you know what I mean? So this all goes in hand. So I think all of this is, a good logical suggestion that we should be able to know roughly when he will be coming. We won't know the day or hour. I can't say that enough for everybody else out there, right? But we can know the year. There's no reason we can't know the year. And how do I know that we can know the year? Well, if we read the following verses from Daniel. So let's go start off in order. We have Daniel 7, Daniel 8, Daniel 9, Daniel 10, and Daniel 12. Okay? In Daniel 7, verse 15, when I read these verses, ask yourself, who's right? Am I right in saying God wants us to know and expects us to try and calculate these things that he gave us to know when the end will be? Or am I wrong and, the average Christian understanding is correct that you can't know when it will happen, right? So it's either going to be one of the two. You can either know it or you can't know it. Like God wants you to try and know it or you cannot know it. It's one of the two, right? So all I got to do is just read these verses from those chapters of Daniel, and it's plain as day. Who's right? Okay, so in Daniel 7:15, pierced has been my spirit, I Daniel, in the midst of the sheath, and the visions of my head trouble me. I have drawn near to one of those angels, standing in the certainty I seek from him of all this vision. And he has said to me, yea, the interpretation of the things he has caused me to know. Let me just say that again. And remember, I've got a few of these to read. This is just the first one. The interpretation of the things he has caused me to know. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. But I want to include it because these are the key terms. Know. Know and understand. That's what I did, is a search in Daniel for know and understand. And these are the following verses. And they prove it. Okay, so the angel is going to cause Daniel to know. That's nothing fantastic, right? But let's go to Daniel 8. And it cometh in verse 15, and it cometh to pass in my seeing, I Daniel the vision, that I require understanding. Right? So we've just been told that the angel is going to help Daniel to know. Right? So Daniel says that he requires understanding. And lo, standing over against me is the appearance of a mighty one, an angel. And I hear a voice of a man between the banks of Ulai, and he calleth and saith, Gabriel, the great archangel, or angel Gabriel, cause this one to understand the appearance. Okay? And Daniel's being shown all these visions and with numbers and calculations about the end days. And we're going to build up to that because that's in the final chapter, right? But we've just been told in the first one, the angel is going to cause Daniel to know. We see that Daniel wants to know. Okay? He requires understanding. So Gabriel has come to cause Daniel to understand the appearance. That's verse 16. Okay? So this is building up, right? But bear with me. And then Gabriel says in verse 17, and he cometh in near my station, and at his coming in I have been afraid, and I fall on my face. And he, Gabriel, saith unto me, understand, Son of Man, the key term, understand, Son of Man, for at the time of the end is the vision. So now you see the end is being introduced into all this knowing and understanding. Okay? And then in verse 19 he says, and Gabriel saith, Lo, I am causing thee to know that which is in the latter end of the indignation. For at the appointed time is the end. Okay, so remember that. Daniel 9. Verse 21, yea, while I am speaking in prayer, then that one Gabriel, whom I had seen in vision at the commencement, being caused to fly swiftly, is coming unto me at the time of the evening present. And he giveth understanding, and speaketh with me, and saith, O Daniel, now I have come forth to cause thee to consider understanding wisely. At the commencement of thy supplications has the word come forth, and I have come to declare it, for thou art greatly desired, and understand thou concerning the matter, and consider concerning the appearance. So we see a lot of mentions of Daniel needing to know and understand these visions, which include these numbers and calculations that will be mentioned in a moment, right? A lot of importance about Daniel knowing and understanding it. So if God, as you see, the common Christian argument is despite the fact that God gave us numbers and apparent calculations for the end times, that we're not able to comprehend it. And we will never know. So, i.e., God, I guess, just gave it to us for no reason. That's like the common Christian argument, right? It's just ridiculous. But we see that Daniel is being caused to know and understand these things, right? That would go against what the argument is. The argument is that we cannot understand it, right? But clearly God is relaying to Daniel that he needs Daniel to know and understand the things that are being shown him. Okay? So if we then go on to Daniel chapter 10, it says in verse 12, And he saith unto me, Do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that thou didst give thy heart to understand, and to humble thyself before thy God, thy words have been heard, and I have come because of thy words. And in verse 14, And I have come to cause thee to understand that which does happen to thy people in the latter end of the days, for yet the vision is after days. So there can be no argument. Clearly, it's been said, I don't know what, half a dozen times, that God is telling, it's usually Gabriel in most cases here, that Daniel should know and understand what he is being shown, and that it is about the end days. Okay? Quite clearly, I have come to cause thee to understand that which does happen to thy people in the latter end of the days, for yet the vision is after days. So now we get to the best one, which is the final batch of verses in Daniel chapter 12. Okay, this is where we've gone down the iceberg, now we're at the body of the iceberg. Okay, in verse 4, And thou, O Daniel, hide the things that he's just been shown, all this wisdom, and seal the book until the time of the end. What that means is, it's not that you can never know it, it's that nobody will be able to understand it until the time of the end. So if we're in the time of the end, I don't know what that is, the last few years, whatever it might be, but if we're in the time of the end, then according to this, we should be able to understand it, because that is what is basically implied. Seal the book till the time of the end. And then it says, Many do go to and fro at the time of the end, and knowledge is multiplied. Knowledge of what? The knowledge in this book, the revelations of knowing and understanding what was being revealed, that will be concealed, won't be understood until the end times have arrived, and then knowledge will be multiplied. So that knowledge will be multiplied at the end. So nobody can say you're not supposed to know these things. God doesn't want us to know these things, right? But anyways, it gets better. In verse 5, And I have looked, I Daniel, and lo, two others, angels, are standing, one here at the edge of the flood, and one there at the edge of the flood. And he saith to the one clothed in linen, who is upon the waters of the flood. This is critical, right? He says, Till when is the end of these wonders? So remember, this is the final chapter of Daniel. He's just been shown all the big terrible things that will befall Israel, okay? And now the angels are discussing, and they say, Till when is the end of these wonders? A question has been asked. Until when? We're going to be given what? A number. Okay? And in verse 7, And I hear the one clothed in linen, the other angel, who is upon the waters of the flood, and he does lift up his right hand, and his left unto the heavens, and sweareth by him God, who is living to the age. So the angel of God is swearing, right? After a time, times and a half. That's the 1260 years that I've talked about in my other videos that proves the 2023 theory. Okay? But after, I'm not here to fuss about numbers though. After 3.5 times, and at the completion of the scattering of the power of the holy people, finished are all these. So that's critical. Let's stop and think about this. Can you know when the end is? Or are you unable to know when the end is? Let's look at evidence. It's either going to be either or. What does the verse suggest? It's asked, till when is the end of these wonders? So can we know when the end is? Well, that should be answered with the answer to this question. Till when is the end of these wonders? And a time period is given, 3.5 times. Okay? That would imply that you are able to calculate. It's getting ready to give us the calculation. It's given us the first batch of numbers. Okay? And it's going to culminate in the next few verses. But this logically shows that we are able to calculate this. Okay? So after 3.5 times, and at the completion of the scattering of the holy people, finished are all these. And I have heard and I do not understand. So he doesn't have full understanding yet, right? And he says, "Oh my Lord, what is the latter end of these?" So Daniel perceived that that wouldn't be the ultimate end. It would be the end of something important, that there'd be something extra. Okay? Now the ironic thing is that the 1260 years was from 688 AD with the Dome of the Rock, which was the real abomination. And that's after Islam had conquered Israel, and that was the completion of the scattering of the holy people, because ever since 70 AD all the way up until 630 or so AD, when Islam conquered Israel, the exile had been taking place for those like 600 years, like 500 and something years, continually. It was never like, it didn't all just happen at 70 AD. So it kept happening. But in 637 or whenever it was, Islam invaded and conquered. And when they conquered, a lot of people fled. That marked the end of the exile, because at that point, Israel had been conquered by an opposing nation, okay, who then desecrated the Temple Mount by building essentially a giant altar to a foreign god, who rewrote the Bible and persecuted and enslaved and killed and beheaded Christians and Jews around the world, even up until recent. Okay, so that was the abomination in 688 AD, and 1260 years later you get 1948 AD, which is the rebirth of Israel, when they had the Great Arab War, that's Islam again, and you had the world wars happening and all that, and at the end of the day, Israel was reborn, and the Jews and the Christians got the right to live there, and they had access to the Temple Mount once again, even though the Dome of the Rock was on it. But that poignant time period was 1260 years exactly. Okay, so that 1260 is very important. It's one part of the calculation. Okay, so but Daniel says, what is the latter end of these? He wants to know that extra last portion. Well, that last portion is 75 years, which will be revealed, because it says that 1335 is the end. So if we know that 1260 ended in 1948, then an additional 75 years gives us 2023, right? So he says in verse 9, he saith, "Go, Daniel, for hidden and sealed are the things till the time of the end." Now this makes sense, because logically, even if people, many did, consider the Dome of the Rock as the abomination, like I said, many prominent scholars did from ancient times. I mean, who wouldn't if you lived back then? The only problem is they didn't have 1948 occurring yet. So the 1260 hadn't come to fruition. It was only after 1948, or at 1948, that people could actually begin to realize, oh, it's been 1260 years during this period between these two major events. And oh, wait a second, the Dome of the Rock marked the utter conquering of Jerusalem and Israel, and the completion of the scattering, the exile of the holy people. And what do you know? 1948 represents what? The opposite. The rebirth of Israel, and the Jews and the Christians being allowed back in and coming back in. That's the opposite of an exile. So it's a perfect unit. And that's the 1260, which is what the angel told Daniel. So it fits beautifully, right? But Daniel knows that there's some period of time left afterwards, the final 75 years, right? So he says, "Go, Daniel, for hidden and sealed are the things till the time of the end. Purify themselves, yea, make themselves white, yea, refined are many, and the wicked have done wickedly, and none of the wicked understand." I mean, what is he talking about with understanding? All of this understanding was about when and what things are happening in the end days, right? Daniel, what was just talked about was trying to understand when the end will be, the end of these wonders, right? But what Daniel didn't ask for at first was, when is the end of days? He just asked, when is the end of those wonders, right? The wonders he had been shown was the Israel being conquered and falling, and the people being scattered. When is the end of those wonders? Well, Israel was reborn and the people came back in 1948. So, but Daniel perceived that, oh wait, I didn't actually ask for when is the end of days going to be. So then he said, what is the latter end of these? So what is the latter end, right? So in verse 10, just one verse later, when it says none of the wicked will understand, is obviously directly applied to understanding when the latter end would be, okay? Or anything pertaining to these things, right? But it says, and those acting wisely do understand. And it goes right into verse 11 saying, and from the time of the turning aside of the perpetual sacrifice, which was at the hands of Babylon in 602 BC, when they overthrew the Jewish temple and began their 18, I think it was, year siege on Jerusalem, which culminated in the destruction and conquering and enslavement and the exile back then, right? But that was in 602 BC, historically, when they turned aside the perpetual sacrifice. But it says, into the giving out of the desolating abomination, which is 688 AD, but it says our days 1,290. It was exactly 1,290 years between these 2 points historically. So once again, this confirms. Okay? But what we have to understand here, without fussing over numbers in the year 2023, is that God is giving Daniel numbers. Daniel asked him, what is the latter end of these? He just asked, what is the end, when is the end of these wonders? Till when is the end of these wonders? God gave him a period of time. And then Daniel says, what is the latter end? When is the latter end? And then God says this additional statement, which verifies it further on the overall timeline of human history. But then he answers Daniel's question, and he says in verse 12, oh, the blessedness of him who is waiting earnestly, and does come to the days 1,330 and 5. And thou dost go on to the end, then thou dost rest, and dost stand in thy lot at the end of the days. And this is commonly understood by Jews and Christians, and always has been, as referencing the very end, the end of days. So let's take a step back from all the fluff that I've talked about and look at the raw data. The raw data is that Daniel is verbatim asking God, when is the end? God is verbatim giving Daniel numbers to calculate when the end would be. We are told from God that the end would be the 1335th. This is obviously year, not day, because Israel did not go into exile for 3.5 years. It would be preposterous to even propose that. They've been in exile for well over 1,260 years now. Okay? But if you're counting the exile from when it truly was brought to fruition, which was the completion of the scattering of the holy people, as a condition was laid out earlier from the angel, that occurred when Israel was conquered by Islam. And you had that other major impulse of exile, like a major pulse left Israel with all these people fleeing, those who remained submitted to Islam. Okay? So it all works out. It all fits perfectly. 1335 would be 2023. So, nobody could say that God doesn't want us to know when the end would be. God explicitly gave us a calculation. It would be like Moses, pretend God had told Moses, I will give you a paycheck. Like maybe God had a little farm somewhere over, outside of Egypt. And God's just like, okay, Moses, outside of your normal duties, could you please go tend these 12 cows that I just really like and care for? I have little names for them. I really like them. They're cute. They're friendly. Can you just go take care of them every day, sweep out their stalls, maybe brush their hair, pat them a few times, talk to them, give them some water and some food and all that, make them feel good, right? Like a little side job type thing. So, and just pretend God tells Moses, I'll give you a wage, I'll pay you something, a decent little payment for doing that for me, right? Maybe it'll be food, whatever you could imagine, who cares, right? But he'll give him something, right? So Moses is then expecting, rightfully, this wage or payment. And I'm just using God as an example. I could have used anything else, right? But I'm just using God-Moses example, right? So Moses is expecting, okay, God told me I'll get paid for looking after these cows for a couple of weeks, right? So let's just say he's going to get paid 10 shekels, right? Whatever that is, right? So Moses is expecting to get paid 10 shekels. Now, he asked God one day, God, how long till I get paid my 10 shekels? And God tells him, oh, well, it's going to be 1,335 days until you get paid your shekels. Moses says, okay. That is essentially what has transpired here. Daniel has asked God, it's just in different words, but that is the maths that's behind it, the science that's behind it. Daniel asked God, when is the end? What is the latter end of these? And God gave him an answer. It's very easy to be misconstrued by all the fluff that's out there when you hear so many people saying you won't know when the end is, you can't know this, you can't know that. And Daniel's prophecy is very confusing to start with, but at the end of the day, I've just read all the verses. It's very clear God wanted Daniel to know and understand that it couldn't be understood until after 1948 anyways, okay? And it says it won't be understood until the time of the end. So in this final generation, we are able, literal final generation of 75 years, we are able, therefore, to understand the 1260, its relevance to everything in prophecy and in history and to the future. And then the knowledge can multiply. But unfortunately, the knowledge isn't multiplying. That's why I'm making all these videos, and this one here, to help show people that we are able to know. We are supposed to know. And we should be helping this knowledge to multiply. We shouldn't be putting each other down. I mean, every other person who's had another theory, bless their soul, maybe they meant well. But all these other people, like Harold Camping, again, he probably meant well to the depth of his soul, but he was wrong. You know what I mean? Maybe I'm wrong, but the point is, God has made it clear. I think it is 2023, but whatever, right? But I'm just saying, you had all these other people who were wrong. That doesn't mean nobody can be right. Just because a lot of people are wrong doesn't mean nobody can be right. People can be right. And I'm not the only person to realize the Dome of the Rock in 2023. I think I've been the most thorough on this, and I found the most supplementary evidence for this theory, far more than anything else I've seen from any other source out there. But I am not the only person to consider this. A lot of people in ancient times, very famous people, considered the Dome of the Rock to be the abomination. They just didn't have 1948 yet, and the other end of that prophecy being fulfilled. It was only after 1948. And also remember, this is when the World War was happening. These are very significant times, and who's being persecuted at that time? The Jews. I mean, these are monumental things taking place. But anyways, I'm not here to fuss over numbers, just to prove the fact that we can know, God wants us to know. And remember the first few verses that I read at the beginning of the video. Jesus was basically mocking the disciples, you could say, rubbing in their face that, how can you not know the times? He wasn't saying you cannot know them. He was saying, how can you not know the times? He wants us to know the times. Okay, and just like Luke showed, Luke is saying that if you watch, we can we'll be ready for when Jesus arrives, and he'll find us watching for his arrival. You can't do that unless you know when he's going to come. But how could you know when he's going to come? The only way you could know is from Daniel. And even Jesus supported Daniel's prophecy, referenced it. I have another video on this. Like 3 or 4 times he referenced Daniel's prophecy and the abomination in the period of time of tribulation that would occur after that. And in Revelation 12, spoken by Jesus, in 2 places he states the same period of 1260. So, I mean, it's confirmed in so many ways that this period of 1260, is something that God wants us to know. I mean, Jesus told us the 1260, the 3.5 times, which is the 1260, talking about the period of exile, which would be 1260. And, God told us about it with Daniel. How can you say that we're not supposed to know? It's like, if you ask God for any number, they're like, how many feet tall am I? Is God going to tell you 4 feet when you're 6 feet? No, if you ask God for a number, he's going to give you a number. Daniel asked God, when is the latter end of these days, or whatever it was that he said? And God gave him 1335. 1335 from when? The completion of the scattering of the holy people and from the abomination. So only when Israel has been conquered, the completion of the scattering has happened, the completion of the exile. So the apex, the fruition of the exile has occurred, and the abomination is standing. Only at when those three things are happening together, only then could it occur. Okay, and that was in 688. So, anyways, folks, God bless you all. Everybody take care.